Have you ever stared at 25 years of your life and realized it was all built on a lie I did? On our anniversary, my husband gave me his gift. He came home after midnight and said, "I never loved you." 4 months later, he returned. He was not there to apologize. He was there with a lawsuit to take everything I had built. He did not just start a divorce. He started a purge. My name is Alara Vance. I am 48 years old, the chief operating officer and the chief architect of Vance Meridian Logistics. I was sitting alone at the summit, the kind of restaurant where the lighting is designed to make everyone look flawless and the reservations are booked months in advance. The chair opposite me was empty. On the table, a single, unlit candle sat between two pristine place settings. This was our 25th anniversary dinner. My phone buzzed on the white linen, a sharp, intrusive sound in the hushed room. I looked down. It was Julian, my husband, our CEO. "Urgent investor meeting. We'll be late." I did not order. I watched the ice in my water glass melt, the condensation tracing a slow, cold path down the crystal. I paid for the sparkling water and left. The drive back to our Cherry Creek mansion was quiet. The house was a masterpiece of modern architecture, all glass and sharp angles, a perfect, sterile box that overlooked the city. I walked through the foyer, my heels clicking on the imported marble. The air was cold, still, and familiar. This was the chill I had lived with for years, a draft that no amount of wealth could insulate me from. He came home just after midnight. I was in the kitchen, staring at the dark granite island. I heard the front door open and close. He was not drunk. There was no stumble in his step, no slurring. He walked in, his suit immaculate, and brought with him the scent of someone else's perfume, a heavy, sweet floral I did not recognize. His eyes were clear, focused, and utterly devoid of warmth. He looked at me not like his wife of a quarter century, but like an employee he was about to fire. He did not apologize for missing dinner. He stood across the island and delivered his gift. "Ilara, I need a simple life," he said. His voice was flat, practiced. "I am leaving." He let the words hang in the air. I waited, my mind processing the statement. Then came the final, precise incision. "And to be honest," he continued, looking right at me, "I never loved you." 25 years, erased. He spoke of needing freedom and simplicity. He said he was tired of the burden of the company, the burden of our marriage. I am the woman who wrote every single line of code for Orion, our proprietary logistics software. I built the digital nervous system that ran our entire multi-million-dollar operation. My mind processes data, finds patterns, executes commands. But this was an error I could not parse. My chest felt like a system crash, a sudden critical failure. But I did not cry. The shock was too cold for tears. I just looked at him, the man I thought I knew, and asked the only practical question that came to mind. "Where will you go?" "Jujo Kong Quan Trong," he said, turning away. A sleek, black suitcase, one I had never seen before, was already waiting by the door. He had packed it before he ever left for his investor meeting. "My lawyer will be in touch." The lock clicked shut. The silence he left behind was absolute, heavier than any sound. I stood there for a long time. Then I walked to my home office, sat in my chair, and logged into the company server. My fingers moved over the keys automatically. I tried to run a systems diagnostic. Access denied. I checked my credentials. My administrator privileges, the ones I had personally hard-coded, the keys to the kingdom I had built, were gone. I had been demoted. My status now read guest. A different kind of feeling replaced the shock, a cold, sharp fury. He had made a mistake. He had demoted me, but he had not locked me out. He had forgotten about the emergency debugging port I built into the original source code. I bypassed his flimsy new protocols and restored my full administrative rights. I started to dig. I did not need to dig deep. I found an invoice, paid from an offshore account I had no knowledge of. It was a lease agreement for a luxury penthouse downtown. The lease was not in his name. It was under a strange limited liability company, a name I had never seen before. The Purge, I realized, had been in motion for months. He had not just left me, he had been actively gutting our life and our company from the inside out. My fingers froze on the keyboard. Guest! The word was an insult, a digital slap in the face. My first instinct was to tear down the firewall he had put up, to show him exactly how fast I could reclaim my territory. My second, more rational thought was to call Bryn Foster. I dialed. Bryn was not just my lawyer, she was an intellectual property specialist, a shark in corporate litigation, and perhaps the only person I knew who was more ruthless with data than I was. She picked up on the third ring, her voice instantly awake and sharp, even at what must have been close to 1 a.m. Ilara. He locked me out, I said. My voice was low, steady, betraying nothing. He left me. He demoted me to guest. There was a beat of silence. It was not shock, it was calculation. Do not react, Bryn said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Do not touch anything he can trace. He made a mistake. He demoted you instead of locking you out completely. That is arrogance. That is sloppy. He wants you to make noise. We will not. Find a back door. I already have one, I said. Good. Go dark. Ilara, become a ghost in your own machine. Collect everything. I want every file transfer, every email, every penny. I will be at my office in 30 minutes. Upload everything to the secure server as you find it. Go! The call ended. The air in my sterile office felt heavy, suffocating. This was not a divorce. This was a corporate raid. I accessed the system through the old debugging port I had built into the Orion code during its infancy. A hidden entry point only I knew. A relic of a time when I trusted no one. My administrator status flashed back onto the screen. I began the audit. A silent forensic sweep starting at the foundation. The money. It did not take long. Julian was a salesman, not an architect. He thought he was clever, but he left digital breadcrumbs everywhere. For the last 6 months, he had been creating phantom consulting contracts. They were sloppy fakes, authorized by him alone, bypassing the usual multi-signature protocols I had insisted upon. These contracts were bleeding the company dry. They were not small amounts. They were funneling millions of dollars into the shell limited liability company I had seen on the penthouse lease, Apex Strategic Solutions. The penthouse was not just a love nest, it was a signing bonus. The theft was brazen, but it was not the worst part. Money could be recovered, the infrastructure. However, I checked the server access logs. My blood ran colder than the marble floors. 2 days prior, Julian had initiated a full data transfer from a remote IP address. He had downloaded everything, the entire customer database, our negotiated shipping rates, our strategic growth plans for the next 5 years, and the predictive analysis models I had just finalized. He had stolen the company's future. The final piece was the why. He said he wanted a simple life. This was not simple. This was complex, calculated theft. I ran a deep recovery protocol on the Exchange server, pulling deleted email caches from the last quarter. I filtered for keywords: Apex, Penthouse, Transfer. A name populated the screen. Sierra. I knew her. Sierra, a data analyst. 28 years old, ambitious, smart, and the one who always laughed loudest at Julian's jokes in board meetings. I had assumed she was just a climber, perhaps a naive fling. The recovered emails laid out a very different story. They were not love letters. They were business plans. This was not just an affair. Sierra was not just the mistress. She was his new partner. The stolen money was their seed capital. The stolen data was their launch package. They were starting their own logistics company, a direct competitor, built using the skeleton of the one I had created. The name of their new venture was right there in the signature block of a deleted email. Apex Logistics. I had the proof. The digital trail of breadcrumbs led from our servers straight to their new corporation. But Julian knew the game. He was the salesman, the face of the company. He had spent the last 2 decades building social capital, ensuring the board of directors was stacked with men who liked his handshake and enjoyed his golf games. I was the architect, the COO, the one who ensured the engines ran. But they did not understand my work. They understood Julian's charm. A direct confrontation would be a disaster. They would side with him, dismiss me as emotional, and vote me out. I needed weight. I needed an ally whose loyalty was not to Julian, but to the company itself. There was only one option. Arthur Vance, Julian's father, the retired founder of Vance Meridian Logistics. Arthur was a man carved from granite, a traditionalist who had built an empire from a single truck and a ledger book. He had retired 5 years ago, reluctantly handing the CEO title to his son. Arthur and I had always shared a quiet respect. We spoke the same language: efficiency, data, results. He appreciated my technical competence. I always sensed he viewed Julian's slick salesmanship as a necessary, if slightly distasteful, part of the business. I arranged a meeting, not at the office, but at his private study, a place few were ever invited. I brought no emotion, only data. I laid the printouts on his antique desk, the fake invoices, the timelines of the wire transfers totaling millions, the lease agreement for the penthouse, and the final damning exhibit, the stolen business plan for Apex Logistics. Arthur was silent as he read. He did not ask about the affair. I knew he would not. That was a personal failing, and in his mind, survivable. This, however, was a betrayal of the business. His face, usually controlled, darkened. He was not disappointed. He was appalled. Not, I realized, by the infidelity, but by the sheer, arrogant stupidity of the theft. He was furious that his son had tried to steal from me. "What did that fool think runs this company?" Arthur finally growled, his voice a low rumble that shook the quiet room. His smile. "He thinks he can just gut the engine and the chassis will still win a race." He tapped the stolen database printout. "This is your work. Alara, this is the company. The rest is just noise. He is a thief, a stupid, arrogant thief. He controls the board." "Arthur," I said, my voice flat. "He controls a dinner club." Arthur shot back. "They are weak, but they are not the only ones with influence. We need Marcus." Marcus Thorne, the only truly independent member of the board, an old-school corporate lawyer and a friend of Arthur's from before the company even existed. Arthur made the call. Within an hour, Marcus was sitting in the study, his face growing paler as I walked him through the evidence. He understood the implications immediately. "This is not just a breach of fiduciary duty," Marcus said quietly. "This is felony fraud. We are looking at criminal charges." "We cannot let it go public," Arthur said, cutting him off. "Panic is a contagion. It will destroy the company before Julian even gets a chance to. We must contain this. The 3 of us. We will form a special committee of the board, effective immediately. We investigate this crisis without alarming the staff or the market." I nodded. Marcus agreed. It was a sound strategy. "Julian believes I am just an old man. Irrelevant," Arthur said, walking to the window overlooking his estate. He was always impatient, always wanted the crown without understanding its weight. He turned back, a look in his eye I had never seen before, a cold, strategic fire. When I retired, Julian was in such a hurry to finalize the transition that he did not read the fine print. He let his lawyers skim the revised bylaws. Arthur looked at me. He forgot about the golden share. I felt my breath catch. The golden share was a myth, a rumor from the company's early days. "It is real," Arthur confirmed, seeing the question on my face. "When we restructured, I retained a single, special share. It grants me, as the founder, permanent veto power over any change in company structure or the liquidation of any core assets. He cannot dissolve this company. He cannot sell it. He cannot merge it. Not without my signature. He had just handed me a shield. Now, I needed to forge the sword. Arthur's golden share was a shield. Bryn, however, was looking for the sword. While I was locked in my silent audit, she was pulling boxes from deep storage, exhuming the original incorporation documents from 25 years ago. She called me at dawn, her voice electric with the thrill of discovery. "Ilara, I am looking at the original articles of incorporation from 1999, she said, the sound of paper crinkling. But more importantly, I am looking at the intellectual property agreement you signed 2 months before that. I remembered. I was 23, fresh out of Stanford, and Orion was my thesis project. Julian had seen its potential, wooed me, promised me the world. My first lawyer, a cautious old man, had insisted on one thing. He found it, I whispered. He found it. Bryn confirmed. Julian was in such a goddamn hurry to launch, he would have signed anything, and he did. He signed an agreement drafted by your first lawyer, confirming that Ilara Vance, as an individual, is the sole and exclusive owner of the Orion source code, in perpetuity. Vance Meridian Logistics does not own the software. Ilara. It never did. The room tilted. "We have a license," I said, my mind racing through the implications. "You have a license," Bryn corrected. "The company has an exclusive license to use your property, contingent on one single, beautiful clause that you remain a major shareholder and an officer of the company. The second they try to remove you, the license is void." He had not just tried to lock me out of my house. He had tried to lock me out of my own property, and in doing so, handed me the keys to his destruction. A new kind of clarity settled over me. Julian was fighting over a carcass. He was welcome to it. I was not interested in saving Vance Meridian. I was not interested in reclaiming my old desk or fighting with his dinner club board. You do not fix a house that has been compromised by termites. You build a new one on a stronger foundation. My work began that day. The anger and the shock were packed away, replaced by cold, methodical focus. I was an architect again, while Julian was busy whining and dining our clients, preparing to steal them. I was creating. I flew to Seattle, a true hub of logistics and technology, far from the Denver social scene. Using my maiden name, I filed the paperwork for a new limited liability company. For the next 3 months, I worked. I did not sleep. I lived on caffeine and code. I did not just copy the old Orion. The old system was brilliant, but it was 25 years old. I tore it down to its studs. I rewrote the core algorithms, optimized the predictive modeling, and built in new security protocols that would make my old system look like a bicycle lock. I called it Orion 2.0. It was not just an upgrade, it was a resurrection. The work was quiet, secretive, all-consuming. I disappeared from the world. I let Julian's lawyers send their threatening letters to Bryn, who deflected them with practiced ease. They thought I was paralyzed by grief. They thought I was a broken woman. They had no idea I was building their coffin. Of course, this required capital. A new company, a new infrastructure. It all cost money. I did not sell the Cherry Creek mansion. I walked back into that cold, sterile monument to my failed marriage, and I saw it not as a home, but as an asset. I mortgaged it. I liquidated every personal stock, every bond, every asset I had sole control over. I funneled every last cent I had in the world into my new Seattle venture. I was not just planning a legal defense. I was planning an invasion. I was betting everything, not on the past, but on the future I was currently writing. I emerged from my Seattle cocoon. The architect returned to Denver, but the woman who arrived was not the COO he had known. She was a ghost. I stopped wearing the power suits I was known for. I wore muted colors, cashmere sweaters that hung loosely on a frame that had lost 15 pounds. I let my hair grow out, abandoning the sharp, precise bob I had maintained for a decade. I looked, to all appearances, like a woman completely undone. We met for the divorce mediation in a sterile conference room downtown. Julian was across the table, flanked by two expensive-looking lawyers. He looked fantastic. He was tan, relaxed, and wore the condescending air of a victor. Sierra was not there. Of course. She was busy being the new CEO in waiting. "Alara," Julian began, his voice dripping with false magnanimity, "I want this to be painless for you. Truly." Bryn sat beside me, her files organized, her face a mask of professional neutrality. I just looked at my hands, clasped in my lap, playing the part of the discarded wife. His lawyers laid out the offer. It was, in their words, incredibly generous. I would get the house in Cherry Creek. He would keep all his shares in Vance Meridian, his personal accounts, and his new penthouse. In return for the house, I would, naturally, sign over my entire stake in the company. As an added kindness, he was offering a small stipend for 2 years, just to help me get back on my feet. "Alara, you have to be realistic," Julian said, leaning forward as if speaking to a child. "You would not understand how to run it anyway. It is all very complicated. This is the best way. Take the house. You were always so fond of it." The house. The house I had already leveraged to its absolute limit, a fact he had been too arrogant and too preoccupied with his theft to check. I looked up at him, letting my eyes water just enough. I summoned every ounce of the grief I should have felt and pushed it to the surface. I just need time to think," I whispered. Julian smiled, a tight, satisfied expression. He patted his lawyer's arm. "Of course, take all the time you need." The mouse had taken the bait. While I was playing the role of Ophelia in Denver, the special committee was hard at work. My restored admin access was a silent, all-seeing eye. Arthur, Marcus, and I held secret, encrypted video calls every night. Julian had been careless with Sierra. He had given her high-level access, and she was using it with the recklessness of a 28-year-old who believed she had won. We watched her. We tracked every email, every phone log, every data packet she accessed. She was not subtle. She was actively poaching our top-tier clients. We recorded her calls, logged her emails to personal accounts, and built a mountain of irrefutable evidence. We watched her promise our clients that Apex Logistics would offer the same reliable Orion system, only newer, faster, and cheaper, once the legal formalities of Julian's divorce were settled. She was violating her non-compete agreement and her fiduciary duty every single hour. And we let her. Every piece of evidence was copied, encrypted, and stored on Bryn's private server. The final touch was my own. I needed Julian to feel secure, to believe he had escaped a dying enterprise. I had lunch with an old executive assistant from the finance department. A woman I knew could not keep a secret. I confessed to her, over salads I barely touched, that things were dire. "I just do not know what to do." I fake-sobbed into my napkin. "Since Julian left, the financials are a mess. We are bleeding money. I think we might be in real trouble." I knew that information would get back to Julian before I had even paid the check. It worked perfectly. He did not double-check the books. He was too busy building his new empire. All my leak did was confirm his own narrative that he was the genius, that I was nothing, and that he had gotten out just in time. He was no longer just a thief. He was a savior, escaping a sinking ship I was personally scuttling. His confidence became absolute, and absolute confidence breeds fatal mistakes. 4 months. That is how long I existed as a ghost. 4 months of coding in Seattle, of playing the grieving wife in Denver, of watching them. The trap was set. My rumors of Vance Meridian's financial instability had spread exactly as I intended. Julian and Sierra were in a panic. They were ready to launch Apex Logistics. They had the stolen money, the stolen client lists, and the penthouse. But they were stalled. They could not legally sign our major clients as long as Vance Meridian Logistics still existed and Sierra was, technically, still our employee. They needed a clean, final death. They needed the company dissolved so they could present themselves as the logical successors, the stable alternative. Julian was running out of time. His stolen capital was burning fast. He needed to move. His final settlement offer came via email to Bryn. It was insulting. He was no longer offering the house, just a small cash payout. He was getting desperate. Bryn's reply was sent 3 minutes later. It was one sentence. My client rejects your offer and will be retaining her full 50% equity stake. This, I knew, would be the catalyst. This was not a negotiation for him. It was a coronation. My refusal was not a business move in his eyes. It was a personal betrayal. I was the scorned wife acting out. He could not launch his new company while I held the old one hostage. His arrogance, fueled by his impatience, finally overflowed. He went on the offensive. He called an emergency meeting of the board of directors. The stated purpose, according to the official email, to discuss the immediate removal of COO Ilara Vance for gross negligence and dereliction of duty. I dialed into the call. I kept my camera off and my microphone muted. I was just a name on a screen, a ghost in the machine. Julian's voice was slick, infused with a practiced somberness. He spoke of difficult decisions and his heavy heart. He painted a picture of a company on the brink of collapse, crippled by an executive me who was paralyzed by personal grief and emotional instability. He said I was refusing to engage, refusing to help, and that my actions or lack thereof were costing them millions. She is burning the house down. Gentlemen, he said, his voice rising with theatrical passion. And for the good of this company, for our company, we must remove her. He called for a vote to forcibly terminate my employment and compel the sale of my shares. He smiled confidently at the few faces on the video call. All in favor. He started. Nay. Marcus Thorne's voice cut through the silence, sharp and clear. Julian's smile faltered. He looked confused. Nay. Arthur Vance boomed. His voice was cold iron. This meeting is a farce. Julian, you are a disgrace to this company's name. The silence was absolute. Julian stared, his face pale with shock. His allies on the board, the men from the golf club, suddenly found their keyboards fascinating. The motion was dead. He had been publicly, decisively rebuked by his own father. I hung up the call. I knew what would happen next. He was not just an arrogant man. He was a humiliated one. And a humiliated man does not retreat. He escalates. He would burn the entire kingdom to the ground before he would be seen as a fool. 2 days later, Bryn called me. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the smile in it. He did it, Ilara, she said. He just served us. Julian had made his final, fatal mistake. He had taken the one path from which there was no return. He had filed a lawsuit. He was suing me. And, in a fit of pure, unadulterated hubris, he was also suing Arthur Vance and Marcus Thorne. The filing was a work of fiction. He accused the three of us of conspiring to destroy the company. He accused me of holding the enterprise hostage, acting irrationally out of spite. He accused Arthur and Marcus of breaching their fiduciary duty by not ousting me. And the demand, the crown jewel of his arrogance. He was petitioning the Denver District Court for an emergency injunction. He was asking a judge to forcibly dissolve Vance Meridian Logistics, liquidate all assets, and force me to sell my shares. He had just officially, in a public court document, demanded the exact outcome he and Sierra needed to launch their stolen company. He thought he was the aggressor, the one forcing the final battle. He had no idea that he had just handed me the weapon, loaded it, and pointed it directly at his own head. He wanted a public hearing. I was more than happy to give him one. The court date was set. Julian's demand for an emergency injunction was granted a hearing at the Denver District Court. This was not a trial. It was a motion, designed to be fast, designed to be brutal. He, of course, hired one of the most expensive litigation firms in the city. Bryn knew them well. Their entire strategy, she explained, would be theater. They would not argue the facts of the business. They would argue the facts of our marriage. They would paint me as a hysterical, irrational woman, a vindictive wife willing to burn down a company just to spite the husband who left her. They would portray Julian as the dynamic, rational CEO, desperate to save his legacy from my emotional rampage. They would ask the judge to do the logical thing, remove the unstable element, and let the sane man get back to work. We met in Bryn's conference room. Me, Bryn, Arthur, and Marcus. The mood was not one of defense. It was not anxious. It was precise. "They are preparing for a fist fight," Bryn said, tapping a pen on a thick binder. "We are preparing for an execution." While Bryn's team assembled the legal binders, the wire transfers, the email logs, Sierra's non-compete, the intellectual property agreement, I focused on the transition. The lawsuit was just noise. The real work was happening in Seattle. I flew out secretly, under my maiden name, my new company. Meridian Ascend was now fully funded. I signed the lease on a sleek, modern office space overlooking Puget Sound. I finalized the new server infrastructure and, most importantly, I executed the final licensing agreement, formally granting Meridian Ascend exclusive worldwide rights to the Orion 2.0 software platform. My old company was now just a shell, running on obsolete code it no longer had a right to use. But a company is not just code. It is people. It is the engineers who understand the architecture, the logistics managers who know the clients, the operations team that turns data into movement. Julian thought the company was his name on the door. I knew it was the talent inside. Back in my secure home office, I spent 3 days drafting offer letters. I analyzed the payroll. I identified the 90% of the staff who were essential, the ones who did the actual work, not the ones who attended Julian's long lunches. For each of them, I crafted an offer, a 10% salary increase over their current pay, a signing bonus, and, most critically, stock options in Meridian Ascend. The letters were drafted, signed, and uploaded to a secure email server. They were queued, ready to be deployed with a single click. They would be sent not before the hearing, and not after, but during, at the exact moment Bryn began her counter-argument. Julian believed he was fighting for the company's assets. He had no idea I was about to walk out the front door with all of them. And then, there was the money. The mortgage on the Cherry Creek house. Bryn had assumed it was my legal war chest. Julian probably assumed I was burning through it on therapists and shopping. They were both wrong. That money was not for the lawyers. It was for the payroll. The entire fund was transferred to Meridian Ascend's business account, earmarked for one purpose: to cover the first 6 months of salary for every employee I was about to rescue. I was not just offering them a job. I was offering them stability. I was showing them that my new venture was not a desperate gamble. It was a funded, operational, and secure reality. It was a promise that while Julian's world was about to implode, theirs was not. We were ready. Every document was filed. Every employee was targeted. Every dollar was allocated. I felt a profound, cold calm. This was not a legal battle. It was a logistics operation. And I am the architect. The courtroom was packed. This was not just a business hearing. It was Denver high society drama, and the room buzzed with it. Reporters lined the back wall, and familiar faces from our social circle filled the benches, their eyes wide with anticipation. At the plaintiff's table sat Julian and Sierra. They were a performance. He was in his best suit, a dark, powerful navy. She was beside him, not as a subordinate, but as a partner. She wore a sharp, cream-colored dress, her hair perfect, a legal pad in front of her. They leaned in, whispering to each other, a united front. They looked like a power couple ready for their coronation. Our table was different. We were not a couple. We were a committee. I sat between Bryn and Arthur, with Marcus beside them. I wore a simple gray dress. I was not playing the victim, nor was I projecting power. I was, to all appearances, indifferent. I felt a strange, cold calm settle over me. This was not a trial about my marriage. It was a system diagnostic. Julian's head lawyer, a man with a booming voice and a $10,000 suit, stood to address the judge. He was all practiced outrage and deep concern. "Your Honor," he began, "we are here today on an emergency basis to stop a tragedy in progress." He paced before the judge, painting his masterpiece of fiction. He described Julian Vance as a pillar of the Denver business community, a dynamic CEO and visionary leader who was being forced to watch his life's work, his father's legacy, be systematically destroyed. And destroyed by whom? He pointed a dramatic finger toward me. He did not call me Alara. He called me Mrs. Vance, or the defendant. He painted me as a woman consumed by bitterness, a spiteful wife, left behind and now acting out of pure, unadulterated malice. He claimed I was holding a $20 million company hostage simply because my feelings were hurt. "This is not a business strategy, Your Honor," he boomed. "This is a tantrum, a woman scorned, willing to burn down the entire house simply because she cannot keep it." He then moved on to the most laughable part of his argument, my competence. Mrs. Vance, for all her years as COO, was never the technical mind, he said, gesturing dismissively. "She has no functional understanding of the complex Orion software that runs this company. Since her husband's departure, she has refused to cooperate with the operations team, refused to sign off on critical updates, and is, through her instability and inaction, driving the company into insolvency." I nearly smiled. He was arguing that I, the woman who wrote Orion, did not understand it. It was perfect. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the judge. She was an older woman, sharp and discerning. She looked at Julian with a neutral expression, then at me. Her gaze lingered. It was not anger or impatience. It was pity. She looked at me the way everyone had for the past 4 months, like I was a fragile, broken thing to be handled with care. She was buying Julian's narrative. She felt sorry for me. Her refusal to sell her shares, her refusal to step aside, the lawyer concluded, is proof of her irrational state. We ask the court to intervene, to do what she is incapable of doing. We ask you to dissolve this company so that its assets can be protected and its employees saved. He sat down to a heavy silence. The case seemed clear. The judge looked at Bryn. "Counselor," the judge said. "Your response?" Bryn stood slowly. She was the picture of calm. She walked to the podium, her files neatly arranged. "Thank you, Your Honor," Bryn said, her voice clear and cutting, stripping all the manufactured emotion from the room. "The plaintiff has presented a compelling, if entirely fictional, narrative. We are not here to discuss a marriage. We are here to discuss a conspiracy to commit corporate fraud." Julian's lawyer leaped to his feet. "Objection. This is a hearing on an injunction, not a criminal trial." "It is relevant, Your Honor," Bryn said smoothly, "as it goes directly to the motive of the plaintiff in seeking this dissolution. But I do not need to make that argument myself." The judge looked intrigued. "Very well, Counselor, call your first witness." Bryn turned to the plaintiff's table. She did not look at me. She did not look at Julian. She looked directly at the 28-year-old sitting beside him. The defense calls Sierra. The entire courtroom turned to look at Sierra. She seemed to shrink under the collective gaze. Julian shot her a look of pure fury, a silent command. His lawyer jumped up. "Objection, Your Honor. The defense cannot call the plaintiff's partner in a civil hearing. She is a named party in my counterpetition for corporate fraud, Your Honor," Bryn stated calmly, "and she is an employee of the company in question. I am absolutely calling her." "Overruled," the judge said, her eyes fixed on Sierra. "Ms. Sierra, please take the stand." She walked, unsteady on her expensive heels. She swore the oath, her voice thin. Bryn was gentle, at first. "Ms. Sierra, you are a data analyst at Vance Meridian, correct?" "Yes." "And you began a personal relationship with Mr. Vance approximately 1 year ago." Sierra glanced at Julian. "Yes." And in the last 6 months, have you, at Mr. Vance's direction, accessed the Vance Meridian client database for any purpose not related to your official duties? No, Sierra said, too quickly. Absolutely not. I am loyal to the company. Loyal to which company? Ms. Sierra. Bryn asked. Vance Meridian, or Apex Logistics. Sierra's face went white. I do not know what you are talking about. Then let me refresh your memory, Bryn said, turning to the judge. We offer Defense Exhibit A, a collection of recovered emails between Ms. Sierra's personal account and Mr. Vance's, dated over the last 4 months. The judge read the submission. A copy was handed to Sierra. Julian's lawyer was frantically whispering to him. Please read the highlighted portion from the email dated September 4th, Bryn instructed. Sierra stared at the page, her hands trembling. I cannot. Allow me, Bryn said. Julian, the transfer of the top 50 client profiles to the new Apex server is complete. We must accelerate the dissolution on Alara's side. We are burning cash on the penthouse lease, and I am having trouble stalling the vendors. Bryn looked up. Is that an email you wrote? Ms. Sierra. This is taken out of context. Sierra stammered. We were trying to protect the clients from her instability. Protect them. Bryn repeated. I see. Let's look at Exhibit B. Bank records for a limited liability company called Apex Strategic Solutions, the company that holds the lease on your penthouse. A new set of documents was passed. Julian, I noted, was no longer looking at Sierra. He was staring at his lawyer, his expression murderous. These records show 2 things. Your Honor, Bryn continued, her voice sharp. First, they show transfers totaling over $3 million from Vance Meridian's offshore accounts into Apex Strategic. Second, they show withdrawals from that same account by Mr. Julian Vance and by Ms. Sierra for personal shopping, for dinners, for the down payment on a luxury car. Bryn took a step closer to the witness stand. This does not look like protecting clients. Ms. Sierra, this looks like systematic embezzlement. This looks like fraud. That is when she broke. It was not a loud sob, but a complete, terrified collapse. He told me it was legal, she cried, the words spilling out. He said it was his money. He said it was all marital property, that he was just moving it to protect it from her. He told me he was the company, and I just did what he said. The courtroom was chaos. The judge banged her gavel. Julian's lawyer was on his feet, yelling, Your Honor, this is an outrageous ambush. This is a simple divorce dispute. It is marital property. What my client does with his own money is not relevant to this motion. He is right, Your Honor, Bryn said, her voice cutting cleanly through the noise. The room fell silent again. Julian's lawyer stopped, confused. This is about property, Bryn agreed. But Mr. Vance and his counsel are operating under a catastrophic misunderstanding. They are fighting over an asset they do not own. Julian's lawyer scoffed. It is a community property state. Counselor, we are here to dissolve the company. We are here to argue over his 50%. That would be true, Bryn said, if Vance Meridian Logistics actually owned its primary asset. But it does not. She turned and picked up one last, thin file. Your Honor, we present Defense Exhibit C, an intellectual property agreement, dated October 5th, 1999. It is signed by Julian Vance and by my client, Alara Vance. It was executed 3 months before Vance Meridian Logistics was ever incorporated. The clerk handed the document to the judge. The judge began to read, her eyes widening. I watched Julian. He was frozen, squinting, trying to remember a document from a quarter-century ago. I saw the precise moment the memory hit him. It was as if I had reached across the room and pulled his skeleton out through his throat. Bryn addressed the judge, but her words were aimed at Julian. As this legally binding agreement proves, Your Honor, the proprietary software code, Orion the engine, the brain, and the entire value of Vance Meridian Logistics, the very software Mr. Vance's lawyer just claimed my client was incompetent to manage, is not a corporate asset. It has never been a corporate asset. The judge looked up from the paper, her gaze shifting from pity to a stunning, cold comprehension. Mr. Vance has sued the wrong person, Bryn declared, her voice ringing in the absolute silence. He does not own the company. He does not even own the software that runs it. She turned, pointed a single steady finger at me, and delivered the final fatal blow. My client, Ilara Vance, does. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. It was no longer the buzz of gossip. It was the vacuum of shock. The judge, her face stripped of all pity, finished reading the intellectual property agreement from 1999. She looked up slowly, her gaze fixed on Bryn. Julian's lawyer was pale, shuffling his papers, finally realizing the trap he had walked into. Julian himself was rigid, staring at me, his expression a mask of dawning, catastrophic horror. Bryn's voice was clinical, devoid of triumph. It was the voice of an architect explaining a final, structural truth. Your Honor, Bryn said, Vance Meridian Logistics was, for its entire 25-year history, merely a licensee. The license to use the Orion software was contingent on my client remaining an officer of the company. However, that license also contained standard clauses against gross misconduct, theft of assets, and breach of fiduciary duty by the licensee's executive officers. She gestured toward Julian and Sierra. The evidence and testimony provided today, including Ms. Sierra's own admissions, prove a conspiracy to commit fraud and systematically steal the licensor's intellectual property and client data. They have fatally breached the terms of the agreement. Bryn paused, letting the weight of the words settle. Therefore, she continued, her voice resonating in the stillness, as the sole and legal owner of the Orion IP, my client, Ilara Vance, has officially terminated the license for Vance Meridian Logistics to use the software. The termination was filed with the state this morning. It is effective immediately. Julian's lawyer finally found his voice. He leaped to his feet, his professional mask shattered. Objection, Your Honor. She cannot just do that. That will destroy the company. That is the entire company. It is worthless without the software. Exactly, Bryn said. She closed her file. A quiet, final sound. Mr. Vance petitioned this court to dissolve a company and liquidate its assets. As of this morning, that company has no assets. There is nothing left for this court to dissolve. The judge's gaze was like ice. She looked at Julian. Mr. Vance, you have brought a frivolous, malicious, and fraudulent suit before this court. Your motion for an emergency injunction is dismissed with extreme prejudice. Her voice hardened. Furthermore, based on the irrefutable evidence of embezzlement and felony fraud presented here today, this court is issuing an immediate order to freeze all personal and corporate assets of Julian Vance, Sierra, and the shell corporation known as Apex Strategic Solutions. This matter is hereby referred to the District Attorney's Office for immediate criminal investigation. At that exact moment, as the judge spoke, my thumb pressed a single button on the phone in my lap. Across town, at the Vance Meridian offices, email alerts began to sound. The key employees, the engineers, the logistics managers, the operations team, the 90% of the staff who truly mattered looked at their screens. They did not see a news alert about their CEO's arrest. They saw a future. They saw the official offer letters from Meridian Ascend. They saw the 10% salary increase, the signing bonuses, and the stock options in a new, fully funded company. They saw that I had not only built a lifeboat, I had already put it in the water. The acceptances began flooding my new server in Seattle within 60 seconds. Julian and Sierra were motionless, their faces white. They were not just defeated, they were erased. They had lost the lawsuit, the company, the stolen money, and their freedom. The shell company they were fighting for was now just that, an empty husk, with no technology, no employees, and no clients. My new team was already contacting every client, informing them of a seamless platform upgrade to the new, faster Orion 2.0. Oh! I stood up. The room exploded into noise. Reporters scrambled. I did not hear them. I picked up my purse. I did not look at Julian. He was no longer a person. He was a bad line of code I had just deleted. I walked calmly down the center aisle, pushed open the heavy courtroom doors, and stepped out into the light, leaving the wreckage behind. My final scene was not in that courtroom. It was 3 days later. I was in my new office in Seattle. It was all glass, overlooking the gray-blue water of Puget Sound. The air smelled like coffee and salt. On my laptop screen, 2 faces smiled back at me, Arthur and Marcus. We were holding the first official board meeting of Meridian Ascend. I raised my coffee mug to them. He said he needed a simple life. I had given it to him. I had not reclaimed my company. I had liberated it. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We would love to know where you are listening from, so please comment below and share your thoughts. Make sure to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories and like this video. You can also show extra support by hitting the hype button, so this story can be heard by many more people.